Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going deep into The Color Purple by Alice Walker. But we're not just reading it,
Yeah.
We've got notes and research. We've got highlighted passages. We're going beyond just the plot.
Exactly. We're going to uncover the layers of meaning that make this book more than just a story. It's about spirituality and identity and societal structures and how they all come together.
It's a tapestry, right? A tapestry of human experience.
Yes.
I love that. And like any good tapestry, well, I always want to pull on a few threads. And one of the threads that stood out to me in the research was this idea of the divine feminine.
Yeah.
From the very first pages, we're dropped right into Celie's head
Right.
as she's looking for God.
Yeah.
And that journey takes her from a place of spiritual captivity to something much more liberating.
Right. And I think it's so fascinating how the novel subverts the traditional idea of God.
Yeah.
Celie doesn't find God in this far-off, patriarchal, kind of judgmental figure. She finds God in herself.
Yeah.
She finds God in the natural world, in the strength of other women.
Oh. Yeah, she finds a spirituality that's already there,
Yeah.
but has been obscured by society and all its limitations. And, this idea of women breaking free from expectations really comes through in Shug Avery.
Oh, absolutely.
How is she described? Captivating, beautiful. Definitely not the image that comes to mind when we think of a traditional religious figure.
Right. Not your typical Sunday school teacher.
Not at all. Not at all.
And even that one little detail, the description of Shug Avery's photograph, her eyes serious though, sadsome,
Yes.
it just suggests a complexity, a depth
Yes.
that you can't really easily define.
Right. She's not just this one-dimensional symbol of rebellion.
Exactly.
She's a whole person with her own story. And that complexity is mirrored in the way the book addresses the very real barriers that these women face. You highlighted in your notes that education was such a major theme in this book.
Yes.
And I think it's so important to remember the historical context.
Of course.
That this is a time when women were actively being kept from educational opportunities.
Absolutely. I mean, just think about that scene with Miss Beasley.
Yes.
When she's talking about Celie and Nettie and how their thirst for knowledge is being stifled. It's just heartbreaking.
It's so sad.
You see all this potential wasted just because they're women.
I know. I always think about that line where Celie's walking behind Shug Avery and the shopkeeper, and she says, "I don't have nothing to offer, and I feels poor."
Yes.
Such a good illustration of how the lack of education can make you feel inadequate. Invisible even.
Right. Because you don't have the language to fully participate in the world.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And yet, even in the face of all these hardships, this book doesn't shy away from showing how these women find moments of resilience, of connection, of joy even. And in your notes, you pointed out how important language and laughter are, especially in Celie and Sofia's relationship.
Yes. I think that's when things start to get really interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
It's such a great turning point. Do you remember that scene where Sofia teaches Celie the word hospitality? And it's such a simple little act of wordplay, but it makes Celie laugh for real.
Right.
She says she feels like her face is going to split open.
And it's just a beautiful example of how language can be so empowering.
Yeah.
By learning new words, she expands her world and her ability to express herself.
Right.
And the laughter is this release of tension, a form of resistance.
Yeah, and it's such a contrast to how Celie is constantly being silenced, especially by Mr. Avo.
Oh, yeah.
So, I feel like those moments with Sofia where she laughs, it's almost like she gets a little taste of what it would be like to have a voice.
Yeah.
To be heard.
Absolutely. And that scene with Sofia and the hospitality really sets us up for what happens later.
Yes.
When Sofia is in prison.
Yes.
And uses humor to cope with the situation.
Yes. It's like that laughter becomes this lifeline for her.
Absolutely. It speaks to the resilience of the human spirit.
Yes.
Our need to find ways to resist oppression.
Okay, so we've talked about spirituality, we've talked about education, we've even talked about laughter as a form of empowerment. But you can't really talk about The Color Purple without talking about the relationships.
Yeah.
And how complex they are. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat it. Some of these relationships are so difficult, especially between Celie and Mr. Pan and Harpo and Sofia.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it's so important to remember that the society that these characters live in is so patriarchal. Men are expected to be dominant and women are expected to be submissive.
Right.
And you see that in the way that Mr. and Harpo really struggle to understand the women in their lives.
Yeah.
It's like they're trapped in these roles that keep them from really connecting with each other.
Yeah, and you see glimmers of good in them.
Yeah.
Especially Harpo.
Oh, yeah.
He obviously loves Sofia and wants her to be happy, but then he falls back into that pattern of dominance, of control,
Yes. I think it's a reminder that people aren't always to blame for their actions, They're products of their environment, of their upbringing.
Right, of what they've always been taught.
Exactly.
And then, in total contrast to that, there's this incredible bond that grows between Celie and Shug Avery.
Yes.
That defies all the norms.
Yes.
And it really becomes Celie's path to self-discovery.
Yes, it's a relationship that allows Celie to explore who she is outside of being a wife, you know, and a caregiver. She begins to understand her self-worth and her desires. It's a turning point in her journey.
It's like Shug Avery opens up this whole world for Celie.
A whole new world.
Where women can be powerful and sensual.
Yes.
And emotionally expressive.
Yes.
And through that connection, Celie is able to see herself differently.
Absolutely.
But this story doesn't just stay in Celie's world.
No.
We get to go beyond that through Nettie's letters from Africa.
Yes, and those letters do so much more than just update us on what's happening.
Right.
They open up a whole new set of challenges.
Yes.
And revelations.
When I first read those letters, I was so struck by the clash of cultures. And, the fact that there are white people in Africa. It just adds another layer to this whole conversation about power and injustice.
Right. And Nettie's observations about the hypocrisy of the missionaries and how the Africans are being exploited, especially on the rubber plantation.
Right.
That's so important. It makes us think about the effects of colonialism.
Yes. It really connects those very personal struggles.
Yeah.
That Celie and Nettie go through to these larger systems of oppression.
Absolutely.
And those details that Nettie writes about the Alinka people, their belief that the roof leaf is a god, and how they're affected by their sacred land being destroyed.
Right. It's not just some abstract issue.
Right.
This is having a real impact.
On real people.
On real people.
And then, of course, there's that huge reveal that Celie's children are alive and living in Africa.
Right. And the lengths that Nettie goes to try to get that truth to Karine, it's just, I don't know. It's amazing.
It speaks to the power of family.
It really does.
Before we move on, I think we should talk about Alice Walker herself for a second.
Oh, of course.
Because you mentioned in your research that she's more than just a novelist.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she's an activist.
Yeah.
A teacher. Yeah. A public intellectual.
And her own experiences. Growing up in the Jim Crow South.
Yeah.
Really informed the themes in The Color Purple.
Of course.
Okay. So we've talked about the power of the divine feminine, the complexities of relationships, the impact of society, even a little bit about Alice Walker herself.
Right.
But before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, I want to go back to one of the most powerful threads in the book.
Yes.
This idea of shifting perspectives.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to God and identity.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that makes The Color Purple so interesting is how it challenges our ideas about God. Do you remember how Shug explains God?
I think about it all the time.
She says, God is inside you and inside everybody else.
Yes.
Such an inclusive view.
Right. It moves away from those judgmental,
yeah,
restrictive ideas of God.
And that actually connects with another idea from your notes, the Alinka people's belief about the serpent.
Yes.
They believe that white people are children of black people.
Right. It completely changes the traditional narrative.
Yeah. It makes us question everything we thought we knew about race and history.
Absolutely. And even our own identities.
Yes. Speaking of identity, can we talk about Mr. Nelly?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, talk about a character transformation. Mm-hmm. He actually apologizes to Celie for keeping her from Nettie. And he admits that he's always loved Shug Avery.
It's true.
And then he says, when you talk about love, I don't have to guess. I have love, and I have been love. Love can't be halted just cause some people's moan and groan. It's just, wow, what a powerful moment.
Yeah, it's like he's finally getting a glimpse of what it could be like to be different, to relate to others with respect.
And love.
Yes,
instead of control and dominance.
Exactly.
It's definitely a moment of hope.
It is.
In a story that can be very dark. And it brings us to maybe the most important theme in the book. This idea of finding freedom and self-love.
Yes.
Even when life is hard.
And Celie's whole journey's about that.
Right.
She goes from being this abused young woman with no voice to someone who has control of her life, who builds a successful business, and finds love on her own terms. Her decision to leave Mr. is just
so powerful.
So powerful. It's a testament to self-love.
Right. And it's like she finally realizes she deserves to be happy and to be respected no
Uh-huh.
matter what. And that message is so powerful.
Yes, it goes way beyond just the story.
It speaks to anyone who has ever felt trapped
Right.
or silenced.
Marginalized.
Oh, okay, my brain is buzzing.
I know, me too.
I think we need to take a break here and let all that sink in.
Yes, we've just scratched the surface of this incredible book.
We have. But hopefully this first part has given you a taste
A good taste.
of what's to come. We'll be back soon to explore even more layers of The Color Purple. But before we do, here's something to think about. What part of Celie's journey speaks to you most deeply? How does her story resonate with your own experiences?
Oh, okay. So I feel like our brains have had some time to process now.
Yes.
And in this part, I really want to explore how this book tackles the idea of reality and belief.
Oh, yeah. And I think The Color Purple does such a good job of this, not just through the individual characters, but through the whole way they see the world. And I think one of the most powerful ways the book does this is through the Alinka people and their beliefs.
Yeah. You know, rereading those sections of the book with your notes, it really struck me just how different the Alinka worldview is from what we think of as the norm, especially in Western cultures. Their emphasis on everything being connected and on cyclical time. And the importance of ancestral wisdom, it just makes us question our own linear, hierarchical ways of thinking.
It really does. It's a profound shift.
It is, in perspective. And one example of that is the Alinka creation story, how they explain the origin of white people, you know?
Yes.
Which completely challenges the way we usually think about race and racial categories. Remember, they believe that the first white man was born from a black woman, but was rejected because he was different?
Yes. And it totally flips the script.
Right.
On this whole idea of racial superiority.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just this powerful reminder that so much of what we think of as truth when it comes to race or history or even just how the world works, it's not really objective truth. It's all about the stories we tell ourselves.
Exactly. It's a constructed narrative.
Right. That reinforces power structures.
Yeah.
And by bringing in this other way of seeing the world, this Alinka worldview, The Color Purple, is making us question those narratives.
It really does.
And consider other possibilities.
It's like it's saying, decolonize your mind.
Yes.
Open up to the fact that there are other ways of knowing, of being.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that idea that we need to question those dominant narratives. I think it's there in how the book deals with spirituality, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
With Shug Avery and her views on God.
Right.
You know, every time I read what she has to say about God, I find something new to think about. Remember that part? When she says, God is inside you and inside everybody else. Trouble do it for most folks, I think. Sorrow, Lord.
Yeah.
Feeling like shit. It's just so real, so raw.
Yes.
It just dismantles this whole idea of God as this punishing, judgmental figure.
Right.
And it replaces that with a God who understands, who's there in our struggles, in our joy, in our pain. You know?
It's a God who meets us where we are.
Yes. And that's so comforting.
It is.
I think for someone like Celie, who's been told her whole life that she's unworthy. It's revolutionary.
Yes, and it makes me think about another thing you mentioned in your notes. This idea that God is always trying to please us, to surprise us. Remember when Shug's talking about The Color Purple? And she says, I think it pisses God off if you walk by the color purple in a field somewhere and don't notice it. It's so playful.
Yeah.
And yet so profound.
Right. It's like God is this playful artist, you know, scattering beauty everywhere. And it's up to us to see it, to enjoy it.
It's a great reminder to pay attention to the present moment, to be open to the unexpected.
And it makes me think about Celie and how she changes throughout the book.
Yeah.
You know? She goes from being so closed off to this woman who really embraces life.
Yeah.
Who finds her creativity, her passion.
Right. And obviously Shug is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
But it's also Celie's own strength.
Right.
Her connection to nature. Finding her voice again through those letters.
And that liberation, you can just feel it.
Oh, yeah.
In that scene where she finally leaves Mr.
That's incredible.
All that anger and hurt she's been holding on to just comes pouring out.
Yes, but she doesn't turn to bitterness.
No.
She just tells the truth, takes control of her life, and walks away.
And it makes me think about her relationship with her own body.
Yeah.
In the beginning, she's so ashamed of her body. But then through Shug's love and acceptance, she starts to see the beauty. The sensuality.
Yeah. Remember when Shug says, it's a lot prettier than you thought, ain't it? Well, you look at your titties, too.
I know. It's such a powerful moment of self-discovery.
It really is. And I think for women especially, who are so often told to be ashamed of their bodies. Right? It's so important to see that, to see a woman loving her body.
Yeah.
And that connects back to this idea of spiritual liberation.
Yes.
You know, it's all connected. Okay, we've been talking about Celie finding freedom and self-love.
Yeah.
But what about Mr. Cheriam?
Right. Does he change at all?
Yeah.
I mean, he's such a cruel character in the beginning. It's hard to imagine him becoming a better person.
You know, that's what's so interesting about this book. There are no easy answers, no simple happy endings. He's complex. And I wouldn't say he has a complete transformation, but you do see some moments of growth, of self-awareness, especially toward the end. Think about that conversation he has with Celie.
About love.
Yes. When he finally apologizes for keeping her away from Nettie, and he admits his feelings for Shug Avery.
I know. It's like he finally lets himself be vulnerable.
And then he says that amazing line, when you talk about love, I don't have to guess. I have love and I have been love. Love can't be halted just because some people's moan and groan.
You know.
It's like he's starting to understand
the
power of love, even if it's not directed at him.
It's a little bit of hope.
Yes.
In a character who can be very hard to like.
And I think that scene where Harpo finds Mr. Sleep being cradled by Sofia.
I know.
It's just so tender. It shows that maybe there's hope for healing, for forgiveness.
Right.
Even in relationships that seem broken.
And it goes back to that theme of interconnectedness.
Yes.
We're all connected.
And that image makes me think about the ending. Celie going back to her childhood home.
Yes. And she finds so much peace there.
It's not just about the physical space.
Right.
It's about the people she loves.
Yeah.
The life she's built. She's free from the pain of her past.
Yeah.
It's an incredible picture of resilience.
Right.
Of finding happiness, even after going through so much.
And it's like everything she's experienced, all the pain and loss led her to that place of strength and acceptance.
Right. And that's such a powerful message for anyone who's ever felt lost or unworthy.
Absolutely.
Celie's journey is so inspiring.
Okay, we've covered a lot here.
We have. It's amazing how much is packed into this story.
I know. So before we go to the last part of our deep dive,
yeah,
what's standing out to you the most? What questions are coming up? What's really resonating with you? As we've been talking about Celie and this idea of reality versus belief, I keep thinking about the ending and how she goes back to that house she grew up in. Yeah. And it's not just, a physical homecoming. It feels spiritual, too. Like all those years of searching led her to this place of peace.
I agree. And it makes me think about one of the biggest things this book is trying to say, that finding meaning and connection isn't about some external truth.
Yeah.
It's about finding that spark inside yourself and seeing it reflected back in the world around you.
Yeah. And it makes me think about how the book approaches spirituality. I mean, you have Celie looking for this traditional patriarchal God.
Right.
And then you have Shug's much more inclusive view, that God is inside all of us.
Right.
And then the Alenka people.
Right.
With their connection to nature, to the roof leaf.
Right. And it's almost like the book is saying there's no one right way to find God. It's about being open to something bigger than yourself, however you define that.
Right. And you can find that sense of the sacred anywhere. Yeah. In nature, in other people, in just noticing the beauty around you.
Yeah.
I keep going back to that line from Shug. I think it pisses God off if you walk by the color purple in a field somewhere and don't notice it.
Oh, that's such a good line.
It's so simple, but it's so much more than that.
Right. It's about appreciating what's around you, the wonder, the little moments of grace, even when things are hard.
It's like we're all part of this dance of creation.
I love that.
And by noticing the beauty, by being grateful, we're connecting to something bigger.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we really need right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the world can feel so divided, so full of fear.
Right.
But the color purple is reminding us that we're all connected, that love matters, and that even when things are dark, there's always hope.
Yeah. And Celie doesn't get there easily.
No.
She goes through so much to get to that understanding.
Right. It's through her relationships, through her pain, her joy, everything.
It's messy. Yep. Do you remember that part where she's talking to about Shug? And she says, I think us here to wonder myself, to wonder, to ask. And that in wondering about the big things and asking about the big things, you learn about the little ones, almost by accident. But you never know nothing more about the big things than you start out with. The more I wonder, the more I love.
Oh, I love that part.
It's so good. It's like she's saying, the search for meaning never really ends.
No, it doesn't. And that by being curious, by being open, we can understand ourselves better, each other better, and the world better.
And the more we do that, the more we love.
Yes.
Wow. This deep dive has been quite a journey. We've talked about so much: spirituality, relationships, society, reality versus belief. And through it all, Celie's story has been there, you know, reminding us that even when things are hard, we can choose love, we can find our voice, we can create a life that means something.
It really has been an incredible conversation.
I hope that our listener is walking away feeling inspired.
I hope so too.
So as we wrap up, I want to ask you one last thing. What are you taking away from this? What questions are sticking with you? What resonated the most? I hope you'll take some time to reflect on those things. Let Celie's story keep unfolding, you know. And until next time, keep wondering, keep seeking, keep loving fiercely.